Good evening. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report.
Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the energy power plays shaping 2026. From nuclear failures in Japan to military coups justified by drug war propaganda, from breakthrough fusion physics that could change everything to the solar industry bracing for political headwinds.
What connects these stories? Simple. Energy is power. And those who control energy control nations, economies, and the future itself. Let's start with the most brazen energy grab we've seen in decades.
Venezuela. The headlines say it's about drugs and democracy. The reality? It's always been about oil.
On January 3, 2026, President Trump announced that the United States would take control of Venezuela's massive oil reserves following a military operation that captured President Nicolas Maduro. According to CNN Business reporting, Trump stated explicitly, "We're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in and start making money for the country."
Let's be clear about what Venezuela has. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Venezuela sits on 303 billion barrels of crude oil. That's roughly one-fifth of the world's total proven reserves. The largest oil reserves on the planet.
But the official justification wasn't oil. Maduro now faces indictment in Manhattan federal court on drug trafficking and narcoterrorism charges. The indictment alleges he moved loads of cocaine under the protection of Venezuelan law enforcement and allows cocaine-fueled corruption to flourish.
Here's the problem with that narrative. According to the Intercept's reporting, Venezuela represents only about 10% of U.S.-bound cocaine traffic. 10%. Meanwhile, Trump recently pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, a man actually convicted of drug trafficking connected to the Sinaloa cartel, because his political ally needed electoral support.
So narcoterrorism is grounds for military invasion when it suits us, but pardonable when it doesn't? That's not drug enforcement policy. That's geopolitical opportunism dressed up in war on drugs rhetoric.
The Intercept draws a direct parallel to 1953 Iran. The CIA orchestrated the overthrow of democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The reason? He nationalized Iran's oil industry, reducing American and British corporate control. We installed the Shah, secured the oil, and created blowback that still reverberates today.
Venezuela nationalized its oil industry in 1976, creating the state-owned petroleum company PDVSA. Then in 2007, Hugo Chavez seized assets from ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips, driving them out of the country. From that moment, Venezuela's government became a problem Washington needed to solve.
CNBC reported that Maduro's overthrow could now pave the way for U.S. oil companies to recover those seized assets. ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips stand to benefit enormously if American firms regain access to Venezuelan oil fields.
The Atlantic Council analyzed what it would take to revive Venezuela's gutted oil industry. Current production is just 1 million barrels per day, less than 1% of global crude production despite having the world's largest reserves. Infrastructure has decayed under sanctions and mismanagement. American companies see billions in reconstruction contracts.
So the United States launches a military operation, which the New York Times editorial board condemned as dangerous and illegal and an act of latter-day imperialism, to remove a government and hand the world's largest oil reserves to American corporations. And we're told it's about cocaine.
The war on drugs has always been a convenient pretext. It's been used to justify military aid, regime change, and intervention across Latin America for decades. But when the real goal is this transparent, Trump literally said making money for the country, the pretense insults our intelligence.
Energy is power. Venezuela's oil represents economic and geopolitical leverage. Controlling that energy means controlling prices, controlling supply chains, and controlling nations that depend on that oil. The drug trafficking charges are window dressing for an old-fashioned resource grab.
Now let's pivot to Japan, where energy desperation met reality this week in spectacular fashion. The world's largest nuclear power plant restarted for the first time since Fukushima. It lasted one day.
The Kashiwazaki-Kariwa nuclear plant in Niigata province brought its number 6 reactor back online Wednesday night after 14 years offline. According to Al Jazeera's reporting, an alarm from the monitoring system sounded during startup procedures Thursday morning, forcing operators to suspend the restart.
This is significant for multiple reasons. First, Kashiwazaki-Kariwa isn't just large, it's the largest nuclear facility on Earth by generating capacity. Second, it's operated by TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, the same entity responsible for the Fukushima Daiichi disaster in 2011.
NBC News reported that the technical issue involved malfunctioning electrical equipment connected to the control rods. Operations had to stop when an alarm went off after 52 of the 205 control rods were removed from the reactor core. TEPCO decided to reinsert the control rods in a planned manner.
Site Superintendent Takeyuki Inagaki told reporters, "We don't expect this to be solved within a day or two. There is no telling at the moment how long it will take." So the first TEPCO-run reactor to resume production since Fukushima is now offline again with no timeline for resolution.
This restart was already delayed. According to Yahoo News, the Wednesday restart had initially been scheduled for Tuesday but was pushed back after another technical issue related to control rod removal was detected over the weekend. So they fixed one problem, tried again, and hit a different problem within hours.
Here's what this tells us about Japan's energy situation. They're desperate enough to restart a massive nuclear plant operated by the company that caused the worst nuclear disaster in their history, in a country still traumatized by Fukushima, despite obvious technical readiness issues.
Japan has been struggling with energy security since shutting down most of its nuclear fleet after 2011. They've relied heavily on imported liquefied natural gas and coal, driving up costs and carbon emissions. Nuclear represented about 30% of Japan's electricity before Fukushima. It dropped to essentially zero.
So the political pressure to restart nuclear is immense. But public trust is fragile. And TEPCO's track record inspires exactly zero confidence. This failed restart, broadcast globally, reinforces every fear about nuclear safety and competence.
The reactor was stable, TEPCO says. No radioactive impact outside the plant. But that's what they said about Fukushima too, until it wasn't. The crisis at Fukushima began with a natural disaster but was catastrophically worsened by operator errors, poor planning, and institutional failures.
Energy security versus public safety. Economic pressure versus environmental risk. Japan needs reliable baseload power, but if you can't operate the reactors safely, if alarms are going off during controlled startups, what happens during an actual emergency?
This failed restart represents a bigger truth about nuclear energy globally. The technology can work, but institutional competence matters more than engineering specs. If operators cut corners, if regulators are captured, if economic pressure overrides safety culture, even the best designed reactor becomes dangerous.
Now let's talk about the energy source that could render all of this obsolete. Fusion. The holy grail of unlimited clean energy. And this week, 2 new physics papers offer genuine progress on the problems holding fusion back.
First paper, published to AR14, Asymptotic Scaling Theory of Electrostatic Turbulent Transport in Magnetised Fusion Plasmas. I know that sounds impenetrable, but bear with me because this matters.
Here's the problem they're solving. Turbulent transport is chaotic, swirling motion that causes plasma particles and heat to escape confinement, has been one of the principal obstacles to achieving efficient magnetic fusion. You need to keep plasma at 100 million degrees Celsius, hotter than the sun's core, magnetically confined long enough for fusion reactions to occur.
But turbulence keeps breaking that confinement. 2 main culprits drive this: temperature gradient instabilities for electrons, called ETG, and for ions, called ITG. These create turbulent eddies that let heat escape, degrading plasma performance and making sustained fusion reactions nearly impossible.
Previous approaches relied on expensive computer simulations or empirical guessing. This new research developed an asymptotic scaling theory that unifies ETG and ITG turbulence within a common mathematical framework. They can now predict how heat escapes based on just 2 key geometric parameters.
The breakthrough is this: they discovered different mathematical relationships, cubic scaling for electron transport versus linear scaling for ion transport. And critically, simulations confirm these predictions work across different reactor designs, both tokamaks and stellarators.
Why does this matter practically? Because it provides, quote, a physics-based foundation for fast, geometry-aware transport models that could accelerate fusion reactor optimization and design. Instead of running months of supercomputer simulations for every design iteration, engineers can use these scaling laws to predict performance.
Scientific American's overview of fusion reactor designs notes that tokamaks and stellarators represent different engineering approaches to the same magnetic confinement challenge. Tokamaks use powerful electromagnets to create a donut-shaped magnetic field. Stellarators use twisted, complex coil shapes for more stable confinement.
Turbulent transport has been a common challenge for both designs. According to reporting on the Wendelstein 7X stellarator in Germany, with neoclassical transport suppressed, the stellarator mostly loses heat through turbulence, little eddies that push particles toward the wall. This new theoretical framework could optimize both reactor types.
The second physics paper addresses Dark-QCD chiral transitions and metastable bubbles. Full disclosure, this research has no immediate practical application to fusion energy. It's fundamental theoretical physics exploring hypothetical dark sector particle dynamics.
But here's why we're covering it anyway. Science doesn't progress in straight lines from theory to application. Quantum chromodynamics, the theory of quarks and gluons, emerged from particle physics research that seemed purely academic. Understanding phase transitions across different physical systems provides foundational knowledge that occasionally yields unexpected breakthroughs.
This research analyzes how dark matter-like particles might undergo dramatic behavior changes at extreme temperatures or densities. They mapped vacuum landscapes, identified metastability windows, and constructed domain wall solutions with chiral feedback. It matters for cosmology and understanding the early universe's evolution.
Could studying phase transitions in theoretical dark sectors inform how we manage phase transitions in fusion plasmas? Maybe. Maybe not. But the history of physics is filled with theoretical work that seemed useless until it suddenly wasn't.
Meanwhile, according to Clean Energy Platform's analysis of fusion technology development in 2026, we're seeing real progress on multiple fronts. AI systems using neural networks can now predict plasma disruptions 300 milliseconds before they happen, allowing active stabilization.
And in early 2026, France's West reactor maintained stable, high-confinement plasma for over 20 minutes. That's a move from pulsed fusion to steady-state fusion, exactly what you need for a practical power plant. Germany's Wendelstein 7X achieved record energy turnover in 2025.
We've been hearing fusion is 20 years away for 60 years. But the gap between break-even, where you get more energy out than you put in, and commercial viability is closing. If theoretical breakthroughs like this turbulent transport work translate to better reactor designs, we could actually see fusion power plants this decade.
Which brings us to the solar industry, dealing with a very different kind of turbulence, political uncertainty.
The Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA, just elected new board leadership to navigate what they're calling evolving regulatory landscapes. According to CleanTechnica, Scott Moskowitz of Xcels was elected board chair, replacing Darren Van Hoff, who became interim president and CEO.
Xcels is described as a major solar manufacturer and clean energy solutions provider. Moskowitz stated, SEIA has an important role to play in advancing durable, bipartisan policy that accelerates deployment, strengthens U.S. manufacturing, and lowers electricity costs.
Notice the language. Durable, bipartisan policy. That's code for, we're worried about political backlash against renewable energy subsidies under the new administration.
SEIA identified several organizational priorities for 2026, navigating policy uncertainty, advancing bipartisan frameworks, accelerating deployment, strengthening domestic manufacturing, and reducing electricity costs. Every single one of those priorities responds to political pressure.
The Inflation Reduction Act provided massive tax credits for solar manufacturing and deployment. Those incentives turbocharged the industry. But now there's legitimate concern that a Republican-controlled government might claw back those subsidies or impose tariffs that advantage fossil fuels.
Dr. Ingmar Ritzenhofen of RWE Clean Energy was elected vice chair, bringing experience in large-scale project development and grid integration. The board represents distributed generation, utility-scale projects, energy storage, manufacturing, residential, and solar services sectors. This is a big, complex industry with real economic and employment impact.
Solar and storage have become the nation's primary new power sources. The economics increasingly favor renewables even without subsidies in many markets. But policy certainty matters for long-term investment. If tax credits disappear or tariffs increase costs, projects get delayed or cancelled.
Moskowitz's emphasis on lowering electricity costs is strategic. The strongest argument for solar is economic, not environmental. If solar and storage reduce consumer power bills while creating manufacturing jobs, that's a bipartisan case. If it's framed as expensive green energy subsidies, it becomes politically vulnerable.
So SEIA is preparing for a political battle. They're electing leadership focused on bipartisan coalition building and emphasizing economic benefits. That tells you they expect a tax on renewable energy policy and they're getting ready to defend their industry.
Which connects to our broader theme tonight. Energy is power. Economic power, political power, geopolitical power. Every one of these stories is fundamentally about who controls energy and what they're willing to do to maintain that control.
The United States invades Venezuela and justifies it with drug war rhetoric, but Trump openly admits it's about oil. That's about control. Controlling the world's largest oil reserves means controlling global energy markets, controlling prices, controlling nations that depend on Venezuelan oil.
Japan restarts a massive nuclear plant despite obvious safety concerns because they're desperate for energy independence. That failed restart exposed the tension between energy security and genuine safety. When economic pressure overrides technical readiness, when operators rush to meet political timelines, that's when disasters happen.
Fusion researchers publish breakthrough theoretical work on turbulent transport, potentially accelerating the path to unlimited clean energy. But fusion threatens every existing energy power structure. Oil companies, gas companies, coal companies, even nuclear utilities, fusion would disrupt all of them. Who benefits from fusion arriving late or never?
And the solar industry, which represents a real, working alternative to fossil fuels right now, not in 20 years, is preparing for political attacks because solar threatens entrenched fossil fuel interests. The technology works. The economics work. But policy uncertainty creates investment risk.
Here's the pattern. Fossil fuel energy creates geopolitical leverage. Nations invade other nations for oil. Corporations fund politicians who protect their subsidies and market access. Regulatory capture ensures that oil and gas keep their advantages while renewables fight for scraps.
Nuclear energy creates centralized power, literally and figuratively. Massive plants, massive utilities, massive capital requirements. You can't build a nuclear reactor in your backyard. You depend on big institutions, which means those institutions control access to energy.
Solar and storage decentralize power. You can put panels on your roof, batteries in your garage, and generate your own electricity. That's why fossil fuel interests and utilities have fought distributed solar so hard. If consumers can generate and store their own power, the utility business model collapses.
And fusion, if it works at scale, could provide unlimited clean energy without fuel costs, without carbon emissions, without dependence on foreign oil or gas. That would be the most profound shift in human civilization since we started burning coal. It would eliminate energy scarcity as a constraint on human development.
But it would also eliminate energy as a tool of control. No more oil embargoes. No more petrostates. No more wars for resources. The geopolitical order that's existed since the Industrial Revolution would fundamentally change.
So when you see a military coup justified by drug war lies to seize oil reserves, when you see nuclear restarts pushed despite safety red flags, when you see solar industries bracing for political attacks, when you see fusion research underfunded compared to fossil fuel subsidies, these aren't separate stories. They're the same story.
It's the story of incumbent power structures fighting to maintain control of energy. Because energy is everything. It's economic prosperity, national security, technological development, and geopolitical leverage all rolled into one.
The transition to clean, decentralized, unlimited energy is technically possible. The physics works. The engineering is solvable. The economics increasingly favor renewables. What stands in the way isn't technology. It's political will and entrenched interests that profit from the current system.
Venezuela's oil could power the world for generations. Or we could transition to solar, wind, storage, and eventually fusion, and leave it in the ground. But ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips don't make money if oil stays in the ground. So we get regime change instead.
Japan could invest in offshore wind, solar, and storage, reducing dependence on nuclear and imported gas. But the utilities built around nuclear power would lose influence. So we get rushed reactor restarts instead.
The US could treat the solar industry as critical infrastructure for energy independence and climate security. Instead, we're seeing signals that subsidies may be rolled back, tariffs imposed, and fossil fuels protected. Because coal and oil companies donate to politicians who control policy.
The most important investigative question we can ask is, who benefits? When you see energy policy that seems irrational, environmentally destructive, economically inefficient, geopolitically dangerous, ask who profits from that policy. Follow the money and you'll find the answer.
The scientists developing fusion turbulence theories. They benefit from clean energy for humanity. The solar manufacturers trying to build bipartisan support. They benefit from distributed clean power. The oil companies regaining access to Venezuela. They benefit from continued fossil fuel dependence.
This isn't a conspiracy. It's simpler than that. It's the predictable behavior of institutions protecting their interests. Fossil fuel companies fund climate denial because climate action threatens their business model. Utilities fight rooftop solar because distributed generation threatens their monopoly. Petrostate dictators resist renewables because oil revenue funds their power.
But here's the thing. The transition is happening anyway. Solar is the cheapest electricity source in history in many markets. Storage is improving rapidly. Fusion is making real progress. The question isn't whether we transition to clean energy, it's how fast and who controls that transition.
If incumbent fossil fuel interests control the transition, they'll slow it down, maintain their profit margins, and leave the rest of us dealing with climate chaos and energy insecurity. If we accelerate the transition democratically, we get cheaper energy, cleaner air, and more stable geopolitics.
Venezuela didn't need to be invaded. The drug war didn't need to be the justification. We could have pursued diplomacy, regional cooperation, and energy partnerships that benefited both nations. But that wouldn't have returned control of oil fields to American corporations.
Japan didn't need to rush nuclear restarts. They could have expanded renewables, invested in storage, and improved efficiency. But that would have required challenging utility monopolies and restructuring energy markets. So we got a failed reactor restart instead.
The solar industry shouldn't have to fight for durable, bipartisan policy. Clean energy that lowers costs and creates jobs should be automatic policy. The fact that it's not tells you how much fossil fuel interests have captured our political system.
These are the investigations that matter. Not just reporting what happened, but exposing why it happened and who benefits. When Trump says we're going to make money from Venezuelan oil, believe him. When TEPCO rushes a reactor restart, ask why they're prioritizing speed over safety. When solar needs bipartisan protection, ask why fossil fuels get subsidies by default.
Energy is power. The fight over energy is the fight over the future. Are we going to remain dependent on finite, polluting resources controlled by corporations and dictators? Or are we going to transition to clean, distributed, unlimited energy that democratizes power itself?
That's the story behind tonight's headlines. A military coup for oil dressed up as drug enforcement. A nuclear failure driven by energy desperation. Scientific breakthroughs that could unlock fusion. And a solar industry preparing to defend clean energy against political attacks.
The connections are clear once you see them. Every energy decision is a power decision. Every policy choice reveals whose interests matter. And every day we delay the transition to clean energy, incumbent interests profit while the rest of us pay the cost.
So what can you do? Support policies that accelerate clean energy deployment. Demand accountability when governments prioritize fossil fuel profits over public interest. Invest in or install renewable energy if you can. And ask the question that cuts through propaganda: who benefits from this?
Because the future of energy is also the future of democracy, peace, and human prosperity. We can have unlimited clean energy, or we can have resource wars and climate chaos. The technology exists to choose the former. Whether we have the political will is up to us.
That's Truth Report for tonight. I'm Maya Clarity.
And I'm Alex Truth. Keep asking questions. Keep demanding answers. And never accept convenient explanations when the real motivations are profit and power.
Good night.